Welcome to our Sound for Video session. Today is the 25th of December, 2017, and today we're going to just kind of walk through some of the highlights, at least for me, what some of the highlights were in the audio gear world for filmmaking. So let's just jump right in. First on the list is we have a variety of new, very small timecode generators available on the market. So for those that are not familiar with the concept, what you do is a timecode generator is a highly accurate clock. You typically have multiple on when you're shooting film. One will be connected to the camera, or actually one will be connected to each of the cameras that you have. And then your audio recorder will also have one. You record the video and the audio separately, and then in post, it's much easier to sync them because they each have time code in a very accurate way written to the video file and the audio files, and so it's very easy to sync them up. And most of the editing applications will just take that information and sync it right up. There were a couple I reviewed this year. One was the Tentacle Sync E, which is a newer version. They actually had the original version a couple years back, and then this new version has some nice new features that we covered in a review over here, which you can check out if you're interested. And then also the Nano Lockets. And they each have, I also did a review on those. I'll put the link for that up here as well. They each have their own kind of unique features. The Nano Locket's really pretty neat because it can wirelessly sync. So you don't have to have all the cables to sync the 2 Nano Lockets or the 3 Nano Lockets or however many you have together. Those can sync wirelessly. You do still have to have the cables to connect them up to your camera and or your audio recorder if you're doing that. But that makes it a lot easier to get set up in, as you're getting started on a shoot. The thing that's kind of unique about the Tentacle Sync E's, on the other hand, from my point of view, is that they have an application that allows you to monitor their current status. That means their battery life battery remaining, whether or not they're all still in sync. So you can actually look at the time code from each of them. It transmits via Bluetooth, low energy, and they work really, really great. I'm really happy with them. So they both have their strengths. So if you're interested in those, there are a couple of the reviews over there. Another thing that they've added to the Tentacle Sync E since we reviewed them is at least the beginnings of a Slate app. And you can see, I don't know if you can see that here, but if I just say, let's look at this one. And it's talking to, is it talking to this one or the other one? I'm not sure which one it's talking to. Oh, it's the blue one, because I chose the blue camera. Yeah, blue camera. So it's this one. So it just shows the time code. So you could actually almost use this as a miniature Slate. It doesn't have all the other Slate features yet, but it does display the time code, which is pretty cool. And that's just a new app since they released them, and that is called, what do they call it? Time Bar. So they have it at least on iOS. I'm not sure whether they have it on Android. Forgot to check that ahead of time, but I think their other app is only iOS as well, so I'm guessing it's probably only iOS. But there's a little something if you are interested in time code. Next up, we have the Zoom F Control. Zoom F Control, if you're not familiar with it, we actually talked about it in a couple of episodes. We kind of gave an introduction to it and also showed how to mix with it at a very basic level in another episode. And we'll, again, links for those. Or down below. I think I only get to put 4 of them up here, and then the rest have to go down below. In any case, it's a control surface with linear faders that allow you to, it makes it a lot easier to do a very attentive or very active mixing job. So for example, if you have a panel discussion or a podcast or something like that, and you're trying to get all the levels right and produce a stereo mix that could be used in the video or for the podcast or whatever, without having to do a whole lot of that work in post, the F Control is a really nice way to do that. And it'd be really cool if sound devices would have a similar type thing for the MixPre series. But it is one of my favorite features of the Zoom F4 and F8 series. So really cool thing. If I'm working from a table or a cart, I actually generally prefer to use that. As much as I love the sound devices MixPre series, having that control surface with the zooms is really, really nice. So that was another highlight for me. That was earlier this year. Next up is the Sound Devices MixPre series. Those all came out this year. The 3 and the 6 came out they were announced at NAB this year, and we had a chance to talk to Paul Isaacs about that. Really great recorders. Are they perfect? No. Are they better than the Zoom F4 and F8? In some ways, not in others. So there's still kind of a toss-up there, and I think there's a use case for both of them. So it really kind of depends on what your priorities are in terms of how you work, but We also have a comparison review if you want to go look at those. And then here in November, they just started shipping the MixPre 10T, which can you see it here? Just barely see it here. That's actually what we're recording with here today. That is the 8 XLR input plus a 3.5 millimeter stereo input, so a total of 10 inputs, 12-track recorder, and we just put a review of that up recently. Really love this one. They've actually, I think, addressed some things that some people had as criticisms of the MixPre 3 and 6 with this version. This one, of course, is much more expensive and significantly, almost twice the price of a Zoom F8, which has the same number of inputs as this. But anyway, the really great thing about 2017 is you now have a lot of options. And I think Sound Devices has been pushed a little bit by Zoom, and I think that's a really great, healthy kind of, I don't think they'd call it a symbiosis, but they're competing, and I think that is where we win. So really great things there. Another thing that came out, I believe it was this year, it may have been late last year, may have been late 2016, I think it was announced at least in 2016, is the Shure Mini CMIT, or CMIT. For those of you that are not familiar with it, the Shure make a CMIT line, that's their shotgun microphone line, and they have the 5U and the, I can't remember if it's the 2U, it's the Super CMIT, but that's about a $5,000 microphone that has some digital signal processing, which does some really amazing things in terms of eliminating or processing out sound or ambient sound and noise, and just getting what you're trying to record. That's kind of cool. That's probably out of the range of most of us in terms of price at about, I think it was about $4,500, as I recall, US. So it's a pretty expensive microphone. A very common shotgun microphone that location sound mixers are using is the CMIT 5U, which is their short shotgun microphone. I have a variety of friends that use it and other acquaintances that use it. Great microphone. And then I also have the Mini CMIT is a kind of a miniature version of that. The specifications are almost the same, as I recall. And I haven't actually had a chance to review it this year. Perhaps next year we can do that. And for me, actually, the new shotgun microphone this year was the DPA 4017B, and that was included in our shotgun microphone comparison. I think that was late summer, early fall. So we have that as well. All right. Next up, and some of you might laugh at me for this one, but you can laugh if you like. The Rode VideoMic Pro Plus actually is something that I got pretty excited about. There are times when you do have to operate with a shotgun microphone on top of your camera. And that's perfectly legitimate in certain circumstances. When you're shooting cinema, obviously that's not ideal. But when you do have to run and gun, that can be a really nice option. And the Rode VideoMic Pro Plus is actually a really nice upgrade from the Rode VideoMic Pro, which I also have. They've addressed some nice issues. Number one, the battery life, and they have a rechargeable battery that comes with it, and you get an amazing amount of battery life easily through a production day, and probably significantly longer, probably more like 2 production days if you're doing that. The Rycote lyre suspension system is fantastic, so it does a really nice job isolating the microphone movement or the camera movement from the microphone, so you don't pick up a lot of that low frequency noise that comes along with movement. And it sounds pretty nice, and it's just a really decent microphone if you need that type of setup. Again, I'm not a huge fan of putting mics on top of cameras, but there are times when you have to do that. So when you do, that's a pretty good choice. Next up, this was also the year of body pack recorders, or body recorders, or whatever you want to call them. There was one from Tascam called the Tascam DR10L. This was first announced or released to the US market, I believe early this year, maybe late last year. And then Electrosonics now have one as well called the PDR. Tascam's actually had one in the European and most of the other markets around the world for quite some time. I think it was called the DR10X, if I'm not mistaken, but this one's a little bit different. I think the main reason they didn't have one in the US market is there were some patent issues. And I don't know if something's changed, but Tascam now has one, so whatever that means. And what it is instead of a wireless transmitter, it's kind of the same form factor, but you hook it on your Talon's belt, or hide it in a Neopax, or whatever. It's like a kind of a strap to hide it underneath clothing, and it's just a recorder. So it records, and then you sync in post. And it's a really convenient way to work. So for example, I think it's a really good device for wedding shooters because there's so much going on, and the last thing you need is to also be worrying about wireless and being able to monitor the entire time. You know, if you're shooting solo, that's a hard job. I've done it before, and it's a lot of work. So that's kind of a cool thing. Electrosonics has one now too that we actually have on the way, so we will be reviewing that one fairly soon here. Again, called the PDR. This one's a little bit different. It's a much higher end unit. Not only does it have the legendary Electrosonics build, but it also has some additional features, including a timecode generator built into the recorder. So that's going to make syncing in post a lot easier. So that's pretty exciting, and I'm looking forward to getting that and doing some testing with that. One more thing in the post audio world this year was iZotope RX6. And I've been a fan and been using iZotope since version 4 or 3. I can't remember actually, it's been a while. But version 6 has come out, and they have actually added a significant number of additional features which are really valuable. Sometimes I get frustrated with software companies and I understand. I work in software actually. What can be challenging sometimes is when they release a new version and there aren't any features in that new version that are useful to you. That can be a little bit frustrating, but version 6 of RX does not fall into that category. It actually has a lot of really useful additional tools. Now it has a breath control module that not a lot of people have talked about, which is really handy if you don't have another way to do that. And this is more than just a noise gate or an expander. It actually can detect. Its algorithm that it uses for detection is not just like a gate where it's looking for the overall amplitude to fall below a certain level before it kicks in, but it's actually also checking the frequency and the kind of the character of the sound to identify it as a breath, and it can actually then push those down. So it makes post-processing audio, dialogue in particular, a much quicker process. So that's a big one. Another thing a lot of people are talking about is the de-rustle, and actually you may be picking up some rustle here. I am using a lavalier microphone today. It also has a de-rustle, so when you pick up that rustling noise, it sounds something like this. Then it makes it a lot easier to remove that. And that's always been a real challenge, and one of the reasons why lavaliers have been a challenge to work with, and why in production we almost always are shooting or recording with a boom and a lav, for a variety of other reasons as well, redundancy, but also to give the post people, you know, their option of using one or the other, whichever sounds best in the particular situation. What's interesting I'm finding over time is as I work on more videos or more short films in particular, is I find that moving back and forth between the boom and the lav can happen a lot, even within a single scene. And it's just amazing how just an individual phrase one can sound better on the lav, the other one will sound a lot better on the boom. Just whatever happens, you know, one of them is covered up with a bunch of clothing rustle, or something else funny happened on set. You've got a great performance, but if you only have one option to choose from, one mic to choose from in post, it can be a real challenge. So I don't know why I got down that path, but in any case, wrapping up, RX6 is a fantastic new addition to the post audio world. All right, and those are my highlights. Of course, there are probably 1,000 other things that I forgot to mention or that weren't as, you know, something that I used a whole lot in my world, but I hope you all are enjoying the process of learning how to produce better sound, to post-process better sound, and I hope you have happy holidays. One last thing too, I've noticed that maybe I haven't been very good at this, but a lot of people are like, well, hey, how do I ask questions or submit questions for the question and answer sessions? And you have courses? I didn't know you had online courses. So the answer is yes, I do. There are actually 3 courses now. They're all available over at school.learnlightandsound.com. You don't have to buy the courses either. If that's not for you, that's fine. Totally understand. You can still join our Sound for Video sessions here, which are just posted up on YouTube. If you do want to be involved in the mailing list where I actually send out the request to say, hey, do any of you have questions? Go ahead and just reply here and I'll add those to the Sound for Video session. Just go sign up for a free account at school.learnlightandsound.com, and you'll also get those as well. I don't send out a ton of email, at most twice a week, and on the twice a week weeks, that's when I'm sending out a note saying, hey, submit your questions, and number 2, the video's now up, you can go watch it. And then the other weeks, I usually just send one when the new session goes up. So anyway, Thanks everybody for all your support. Hope you have happy holidays. We'll talk to you again in 2018.